Yo, what's good, everybody? Uh, Glad you guys could join me for another video. So today, once again, doing something different. Doing another, trying to do this whole screen recording thing. I'm still fresh to this whole thing. But anyway, decided to do a tier list on one of my favorite metal bands, known as Meshuggah. Been on the Meshuggah kit for the past few days, and I recently, uh, if you look at all these albums down here at the bottom, except for this right here, this IEP right here. Uh, I pretty much have all these albums now. The other day, I actually got one of the albums in the mail, which completed my studio album for Meshuggah, at least until they put out another album, which they are working on a new album right now. I follow them on Instagram, and they've been posting up pics here and there showing their work in the studio and so forth. But yeah, Meshuggah, they're a Swedish metal band, extreme metal band, progressive groove metal. Uh, they're considered the creators of Djent, and they're just one of the most unique metal bands out there. They've been around for over 30 years. They've been with the same label, Nuclear Blast, for 30 years. Excuse me, 30 years. I think they've been with Nuclear Blast since its inception back in the early 90s, man. So that's a real that's really rare for a band uh, to be with the same label for that many years. That's a rarity. Usually bands will hop from label to label, but they've been with Nuclear Blast ever since their inception for the most part. So without further ado, because I don't want this video to be too long, but we're gonna get into this tier list of ranking Meshuggah albums. So the first album we're gonna talk about is the debut album right here, Contradictions Collapse, released in 1991. The band's debut album. Now, most people consider this album to be an extension of Metallica's And Justice for All. And the reason being is because this is mainly a technical thrash metal album. And at this point, Meshuggah hadn't really found their sound yet. They were still a fairly new band. And if you listen to Jens' vocals on the album, he sounds a lot like James Hetfield. So they hadn't really found their sound yet. It's more of a technical thrash metal album, but it's not a bad album. It's still good music. It's still good music, but they just hadn't really found their sound yet. So I'm gonna put Contradictions Collapse at C. And like I said, it's not a terrible album. It's just that it's more of like a Metallica worship. It's more like Metallica worship on this record, man. They sound a lot like Metallica, and I can really hear the whole Injustice for All influence that the band's got going on this record. But it's still good, man. You just don't really get that classic Meshuggah sound that they would later start to develop. But there are some hints of it. I mean, the guitar solos, they have those unique kind of jazzy guitar solos that are prevalent on the record. And another interesting thing is that Fredrik, the lead guitarist, he also shared lead vocals with Jens on this record. And Jens also was playing rhythm guitar at this time. I believe this is the only studio album that Jens played rhythm guitar. After this album, he actually retired from playing guitar. And a little funny fact, he also had hair at this time. He had long hair around this time too, man. So thought I would throw that tab in there. But you know, it's a good solid technical thrash metal album, but they just really hadn't found their sound at this point. And my version has bonus tracks, which include the Nun EP that came out about a few years later, about 2 or 3 years later, which is very interesting, man. I wish the Nun EP was on here because I could really talk about that. But that was really the beginning where Meshuggah really started to experiment with their sound and really started to find themselves. But yeah, so I'm gonna put Contradictions Collapse at C. So next album uh, is Destroy, Erase, Improve. This was actually the first Meshuggah album that I bought when I decided to get into the band and start my journey, listening to their music. And of course, this is considered the seminal album one of the seminal albums in Meshuggah's discography. It was actually the album that broke them as an international metal band. A lot of people were blown away by this record. I mean, uh, even by today's standards, I would say that this album is still ahead of its time. So just because of the legacy, uh, I'm gonna put Destroy, Erase, and Prove at A tier. You know, it's not one of my favorite Meshuggah albums, but it's just the legacy behind it. I mean, this record really blew a lot of people away, and this was also the album where the band started to really formulate their own sound. They still have the thrash metal influences from the previous records, but more of that groove oriented sound starting to creep in. Uh, Still very technically proficient. Uh, there's a lot more of a jazzy influence on here, man. There's a lot more jazzy parts on a lot of the songs on this record, man. But really good album, man. And you know, I also feel like it has somewhat of an industrial feel to it as well. There's this very kind of mechanical sound about this record that I think kind of gives it kind of an industrial slant. And it's not quite groovy or djenty yet, although those elements are starting to creep in. But for the most part, it was definitely far different from what the debut album was. I mean, this is something that was totally different. You know, people just didn't know what to think about this record, man. And even today, man, even today, this is one of the greatest albums of all time. So yeah, just with the legacy behind it, man, I'm gonna put it at A tier. And let's see here, next album. Oh yeah, Chaosphere. Chaosphere released in 1998. This is one of my personal favorite Meshuggah albums right here because I feel as though this record is where the band really became Meshuggah. Uh, they're starting to slow things down a bit, so that groove-oriented sound starting to creep in. The more djenty parts are starting to take effect, and it's a very chaotic album. Hence the title, Chaosphere. It's very chaotic, but at the same time, it's an organized chaos because as chaotic as it sounds, the band is still tight. And I personally don't know exactly when math metal actually started to formulate around this time. I'm not sure when Dillinger and Escape Plan debuted on the scene. I want to say they might have started. I want to say Dillinger and Escape Plan might have debuted somewhere around this time frame. But I will go on a limb and say that Chaosphere is a pioneering album as far as math metal or mathcore as you want to call it, man. Because there's a lot of parts on this album where you just really don't know what the heck is going on. You know, you're trying to follow along the rhythm and try to find that rhythm, and but it still sounds so tight and proficient. Like they don't lose a step by any chance. And also Jens, his vocals are slightly starting to transition more. I mean, it still has more of that hardcore influence yells that he implemented on the previous records, but you can start to hear like that kind of high screams that he will formulate later on in his career. You're starting to hear that take more of an effect as well. But one of my favorite songs on here is called Corridors of Chameleons, man, because the album starts off I mean not the album, but that song starts off as a very chaotic, that's all over the place track, and then by the second half, it gets into this real kind of hip hopish, uh, sort of industrial groove, and the way that Jens delivers his vocals on that song, it's almost like he's rapping a little bit, man. But I really dig that song, and Neurotica is another good one. Same. The debut, I mean, excuse me, the first track that kicks off the album is awesome as well, man. So I think I'm gonna put Chaosphere at A2 because I think that was a defining record within their career. It really set the stage for so many bands. I honestly think that a lot of math metal bands were inspired by this record in particular. Let's see here. So next album is Nothing, released in 2002. Another groundbreaking album in Meshuggah's discography. This has actually become one of my favorites as well. This time they slowed things down quite a bit on this record. This is more groove oriented. This album was way more groove oriented. I've heard people even say that they starting to seep in a little bit of new metal elements into the sound. A lot of the polyrhythms, and I forgot to mention that Chaos Fear is the album where they started to implement those polyrhythms as well, but they really bring it to prominence on Nothing. Just a really great record, man. Rational Gaze is an awesome song. The first track on the album, Stanga, is a fan favorite. I like Pulling Straws and Random because I like the last part of the song where it goes into that melodic solo. Uh, Man, just a lot of great songs on this album. I've been listening to this album a lot here lately, and every time I listen to it, it just gets better and better for me. But it's a superb album, man. I really think that this record right here is where Meshuggah really just put a stamp on who they were as a band. Lots of progressive metal elements. That classic sound, that classic Djenty sound that the band was developing, it really came into prominence on this record. And there's actually two versions of this album. There's the original version, which is pictured here, and then there's the 2006 version, which they added in the 8-string guitars. And I've heard a lot of good things about the remastered remix version as well. One of a few times. So I'm gonna put Nothing at S tier, man, because it's just a really remarkable album. Really enjoy it. And the next album, this is the most recent one I bought, uh, completing my studio album collection so far. Uh, Catch 33. Now I've heard a lot of differing opinions about this record. People's opinions seem to be very divisive on this record. Some people love it, some people hate it. I tend to be one of the people that really enjoy this record. It's a different type of album though. It's not like a normal studio album. The band really doesn't view it as a bona fide album. As I read it, they look at it as more of as a experimental piece. So essentially, Catch 33 is really just one long song that's broken up into 13 parts. So it's not really a record that you can like skip around and listen to different tracks. It's one of those records where you really got to sit down and listen to it all the way through. And I think this was the first album where uh, Thomas, the drummer, I think this is where he started implementing that program, the drum kit from hell. He's actually not playing live drums on this record. It's a drum program. It's a drum kit program that he uses. I quite frankly don't mind that. I've heard some people say that it makes it sound soulless or whatever, but listening to this record, man, I didn't really get that feeling from it. I thought it sounded great, man. And like I said, my only criticism would be is that you can't really listen to it like a normal studio album and skip around of different tracks because everything's broken up into 13 parts, and some parts are like segments that seek into a more fuller track or whatever. But other than that, man, I think Catch 33 is pretty awesome. I actually asked a question about this on my Instagram and then a Facebook group called Headbangers NC that I'm a member of. And most people came back with positive responses. So most of them even saying this is their favorite Meshuggah album. But I'm gonna put this at B. I'm gonna put it at B. Uh, I think that's a fair place to put it at B. I think it's a really good album. And I think I comes next. I don't really know much about I haven't really listened to it. So I'm not gonna really talk about that one. But I do have a friend of mine, a personal friend of mine. He said that I is really good. It's like a long, like kind of doom metal song. But so I don't know much about I. I'm really not gonna talk about it that much. Uh, so next album is Obzin, released in 2008. Another popular album from Meshuggah. Another, I guess you could say, quintessential album. This album is best known for the song "Bleed," which so many people have done reaction videos to. They're still doing reaction videos to this particular song. And I ain't gonna lie to you. I've recently really just started to really get into Obzin. I think because of this album, they went back more to their thrash metal roots from the earlier records. So it's a very intense, in your face record. Most of the songs are at a very fast, like thrash metal tempo. There's a few songs on there that slow it down a bit, and there are some parts in the faster songs where they slow things down and get a little groovy. But for the most part, it's more of a I guess you say more of a technical thrash metal album, but it's in Meshuggah style. They don't sound like anybody else like they did on Contradictions Collapse. But you know, Bleed is a great song. I think they were nominated for a Grammy for Bleed. I don't know if they won, but I know it's one of their most popular songs. And I actually enjoy the album a lot more now. I actually think that it's a great record. I've been listening to it a lot. It can get a little bit inconsistent on some parts, but I think for the most part it's really good. I've grown to like it, and Jens's vocals, he had transitioned to more of those high screams that he's known for now. By the time this record came out, and you know, I really enjoy it. You know, I really enjoy the record now, but I think I'm gonna put it at A tier. Excuse me, A, yeah. But it's a great album. I dig it. It's slowly becoming one of my favorites, man. I do like the song called "Despiteful Snake," and the last song on the I can't think of the name of the last song. I should have wrote it down. But there's a lot of interesting moments that happen on that record. And the title Obscene is a combination of the words obscene and zen, and it's supposed to mean how society has formed a zen towards everything out here that's obscene. You know, where people, I guess, people have become desensitized to like obscenity and things of that nature. So that's what it's supposed to mean. But it's a great record, man. I highly recommend it. So next album is Colossal. This is another one of my personal favorite records by Meshuggah. Listen to it quite often, and they took it. Well, what can I say? They took it to a new direction with this record, man. This record is darker. It's they bring back the more groovier moments of albums like uh Nothing. They bring that element back, but they make it more heavier and make it more darker. Uh, One of the singles from the album, "I Am Colossus," which is the first track on the album, very heavy and dark record, almost doom metal in some aspects. Man, it's a very heavy song, and the video is very heavy and wicked too, man. Video is video is crazy, man. The video is like a cross between Tim Burton's Nightmare, The Night Before Christmas, and a Tool video because it's a claymation. That's the way the video looks, man. But this album, they kind of implement some things from Option. There's some faster, more up tempo, thrashy songs on here as well, and but it's just a bit darker, man. It's just a bit darker and heavy. I think one of the highlights on the album is "Behind the Sun," which was a song that was composed by vocalist Jens Kidman. I think that's an interesting song, man. It's a really cool song. Uh, he should write more songs for the band, in my opinion, man. That song is really good. And Demi Urge is another good one. Uh, the demon, the demon name is Surveillance, which is I think one of the few songs that they do not play live because it is very hard for them to play live. It's very intense. It's very draining for them to play that song, so they don't play it live. Uh, Don't Look Down. A lot of great songs on here, and I've been going back listening to the album, reading the lyrics because a lot of the lyrics on here are very profound. Where like such as demon's name is Surveillance. That's about how we're being watched, whether it's by like the government or by the technology, like the gadgets we use, like cell phones and everything. Everybody's watching us. But I'm gonna put Coloss at A tier. I mean not A tier, but S tier because I think it's a really good album. And the last album here is The Violent Sleep of Reason. And I think this was the second Meshuggah album that I bought. But this album right here, I think is actually one of their best albums in my opinion. And it's actually the album that made me a fan of Meshuggah. It's actually the album that made me a fan of Meshuggah, man. I really it was something about this album that just clicked with me. Even though Destroy, Erase, and Prove was the first one I bought, it was something about The Violent Sleep of Reason that just clicked with me. I think it's because they actually recorded the album live, all of them in the studio together at the same time. But there's just a lot of good songs on here. Clockworks, Born to Dissonance, Monstro City, Ivory Tower is another good one. The title track is another awesome one. There's so many good songs on here, man, and it's a heavy record, and it really made me anticipate. It's really making me anticipate what they're gonna come out with next when this new album comes out, man. But just an awesome record. I didn't hear too many people talk about it when it was released because it came out in 2016, and it did get widespread critical acclaim, but I don't hear too many Meshuggah fans really talk about it that much. And I'm trying to decide where I want to put this, man, because it's really a good album. It's really a good album. I don't know. Trying to decide. You know what? I think I'm gonna put Obson up here at S tier because of I think I'm gonna put Obson up there, man, because that record just really took the band off to the next level. And I'm gonna put Violent Sleeper Reason at A tier, man. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put Violent Sleeper Reason at A tier, man. But yeah, it's a really good album, man. It's a really good album. Really, really enjoy that record, man. It's one of my favorites. I listen to it a lot. Listen to it a lot, man. But yeah, this is my tier list for Meshuggah, and yeah, man. I think I'm satisfied with this. I think I'm satisfied with this. To be honest with you, Meshuggah really doesn't have a bad album in their discography. All their records are pretty solid. Even Contradictions Collapse, even though it's full of like Metallica worship and so forth. Uh, I honestly feel like that record is still a solid record. I feel like it's still a solid album, man. Like I said, I don't really know too much about I haven't taken the time to listen to it myself, but it's really a more of an EP. I just really wanted to focus more on the studio albums. But yeah, that's my tier list for Meshuggah. And yeah, so I hope you guys dig it. If you don't agree, hey, feel free to leave a comment. Maybe show me what your ranking would have been as far as like Meshuggah albums, man. I'm always interested in that. But yeah, man, really dig this whole tier list thing. Yeah, definitely check out the tier list if any of you guys want to like make your own tier list. They usually have tier lists of artists or bands or whatever made up, so you can kind of go in there and you can like make your own ranking. So definitely check that out. I might leave a link to it in my video, in the description in my video. But yeah, man, that's it for this Meshuggah tier list. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, like, share, subscribe to the channel. Thank everybody for their support. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day and a blessed week. And as always, love, peace, and music. Peace out.